Sarah Ferguson has just shattered the royal family's carefully constructed silence. In a revelation that's sending shockwaves through Buckingham Palace, the Duchess of York has exposed a secret agreement between Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew that threatens to destroy what's left of the monarchy's credibility. The Duchess's bombshell. November 2025 will be remembered as the month Sarah Ferguson finally broke her silence. For years, the Duchess of York had been the royal family's most unpredictable member, the woman who knew too much and said too little. But on a cold Wednesday afternoon, just 5 minutes ago, everything changed. In an unscheduled appearance that caught even her closest advisors off guard, Sarah stepped before cameras and revealed something that has left royal watchers across the globe absolutely stunned. The setting was deliberate. Not Buckingham Palace, not Kensington, but a modest townhouse in Mayfair where Sarah has been quietly residing since her separation from official royal duties. The choice of location spoke volumes. This wasn't sanctioned. This wasn't approved. This was Sarah Ferguson, the woman who has survived scandal after scandal, deciding that enough was finally enough. What she revealed was nothing short of explosive. A secret agreement, a pact made in the shadows, an arrangement between two of the most controversial figures in modern royal history, Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, two people who on the surface couldn't seem more different. But according to Sarah, they've been working together for far longer than anyone imagined. The agreement, as Sarah described it, was forged in the aftermath of Andrew's catastrophic Newsnight interview in November 2019. That interview, you'll remember, was supposed to clear his name regarding his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Instead, it became a public relations disaster that forced him to step back from royal duties. What the public didn't know, what the palace worked tirelessly to conceal, was that Meghan Markle reached out to Andrew in the weeks following that interview. Sarah's revelation paints a picture that's both calculated and chilling. According to the Duchess, Meghan saw an opportunity in Andrew's downfall. She saw a man who was desperate, isolated, and in need of allies. But more importantly, she saw someone who possessed what she needed most: insider knowledge, royal secrets, and a willingness to break ranks with the institution that had cast him aside. The agreement was simple on its surface, but devastating in its implications. Meghan would provide Andrew with public sympathy, strategically placed media support, and access to her growing network of celebrity allies and media contacts. In return, Andrew would share information, details about palace operations, insights into family dynamics, ammunition that could be used when the time was right. Sarah's voice trembled as she described discovering this arrangement. She spoke of finding encrypted messages, of overhearing phone conversations that didn't quite add up, of watching Andrew's demeanor shift whenever Meghan's name was mentioned. For months, she said, she convinced herself she was imagining things. After all, what possible connection could exist between her ex-husband and the woman who had married into the family and then so dramatically departed? But the evidence became impossible to ignore. Sarah described a meeting that took place in early 2020, just weeks before Meghan and Harry announced their intention to step back from royal duties. Andrew, she claims, traveled to Canada under the guise of a private trip. The official story was that he needed time away from the British media circus. The reality, according to Sarah, was a face-to-face meeting with Meghan at a secluded estate on Vancouver Island. What was discussed at that meeting remains partially unclear, but Sarah pieced together enough from Andrew's subsequent behavior to understand its significance. The agreement was being solidified, terms were being finalized, and both parties were preparing for what would become one of the most tumultuous periods in modern royal history. The timing of Sarah's revelation is crucial. It comes just days after renewed scrutiny of both Andrew and Meghan. Andrew's attempts to rehabilitate his public image have stalled repeatedly. Each effort met with public outcry and media skepticism. Meanwhile, Meghan's own relationship with the royal family remains fractured, despite occasional rumors of reconciliation. Sarah's decision to speak now suggests she believes the public deserves to know the truth, consequences be damned. But there's something else at play here. Something Sarah alluded to but didn't fully explain. She spoke of protecting her daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, from being caught in the crossfire of what she called a game that's gone too far. She mentioned threats that had been made, though she wouldn't elaborate on their nature or source, and she made it clear that her decision to come forward wasn't made lightly. The palace's response has been swift and predictable. Within minutes of Sarah's statement, official sources were dismissing her claims as categorically false and the product of a troubled imagination. But those who know Sarah, those who've watched her navigate the treacherous waters of royal life for nearly 4 decades, aren't so quick to dismiss her words. This is a woman who's made mistakes, certainly, who's been humiliated publicly and struggled privately, but she's also a woman who's proven herself remarkably resilient and, when pushed, surprisingly truthful. A pact forged in scandal. To understand how this secret agreement came to be, we need to travel back to November 2019. Prince Andrew's interview with Emily Maitlis on BBC's Newsnight was meant to be his redemption arc. Instead, it became a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis. His inability to express regret, his bizarre alibi about being at Pizza Express in Woking, his claim that he couldn't sweat due to an overdose of adrenaline during the Falklands War, all of it combined to create a public relations catastrophe of historic proportions. Within days, Andrew was forced to step back from public duties. Sponsors abandoned his charitable initiatives. Institutions scrambled to distance themselves from him. He became effectively a royal in exile within his own family. The Queen stood by him, as mothers do. But even her support couldn't shield him from the relentless criticism and mockery that followed. Now, imagine being Meghan Markle during this same period. She was facing her own battles with the British press, feeling isolated within the royal family, and planning her eventual departure from royal duties. But she was also strategic, calculating, and keenly aware of how power works within institutions. According to Sarah's account, Meghan recognized something crucial about Andrew's situation. A desperate man is a useful man. The initial contact, Sarah claims, came through intermediaries. Meghan's team reached out to people close to Andrew with expressions of sympathy and support. The messages were subtle at first. Comments about how unfairly he'd been treated, observations about the double standards within the palace, suggestions that they both understood what it meant to be scapegoated by an institution more concerned with its image than with truth or justice. Andrew, humiliated and angry, was receptive. Here was someone who seemed to understand his position, someone who wasn't lecturing him or distancing herself from him. The fact that she was also married to his nephew, that she was herself becoming increasingly alienated from the family, only made the connection more appealing. They shared, or so it seemed, a common enemy. By early 2020, the relationship had evolved from sympathetic messages to active coordination. Sarah described finding evidence of regular communication between Andrew's phone and unknown numbers that she later traced back to Meghan's team. The conversations weren't just personal, they were strategic. They discussed palace vulnerabilities. They shared information about internal family tensions. They coordinated their public statements in ways designed to maximum impact and minimum accountability. The Vancouver meeting that Sarah referenced was the culmination of months of careful planning. Andrew's trip was arranged with extraordinary discretion. He used private transportation. He stayed at properties owned by mutual acquaintances. And he met with Meghan at a location chosen specifically for its isolation and security. What they discussed during those hours together has been the subject of intense speculation, but Sarah's sources suggest several key topics were addressed. First, there was the matter of mutual protection. Both Andrew and Meghan faced intense media scrutiny and public criticism. Both felt betrayed by the institution they'd served. The agreement included provisions for defending each other publicly when opportunities arose, strategic leaks to sympathetic journalists, coordinated social media campaigns, behind-the-scenes pressure on media outlets to soften their coverage. Second, there was information sharing. Andrew possessed decades of insider knowledge about how the royal family operated. He understood the palace's pressure points, its secrets, its vulnerabilities. Meghan, meanwhile, had her own insights into the current state of affairs and access to a global media network that Andrew lacked. The exchange of information benefited both parties, but it also created a dangerous dynamic. Each now possessed ammunition that could be used against the other if the relationship soured. Third, and perhaps most troubling, there was discussion of future coordination. According to Sarah's account, Andrew and Meghan discussed scenarios in which they might need to act together, potential crises that could be exploited, moments when the palace would be particularly vulnerable. The conversations weren't just reactive. They were planning for contingencies that hadn't yet occurred. The agreement was never written down, at least not in any formal sense. Both parties were too clever for that, but it existed nonetheless, an understanding between two people who felt they'd been wronged and were determined to level the playing field. What they didn't anticipate was that someone was watching. Someone was taking notes. Someone would eventually decide that the game had gone too far. Sarah Ferguson's decision to remain silent for so long is understandable when you consider her position. She was still technically part of the royal family, still dependent on their goodwill for her lifestyle and her daughter's positions. Speaking out meant risking everything, but it also meant watching Andrew dig himself deeper into a hole, watching him make alliances that could only end badly, and watching the institution she'd once been part of tear itself apart from within. The breaking point Sarah suggested came recently. She wouldn't provide specific details, but she indicated that the agreement between Andrew and Meghan had evolved into something more dangerous than either of them intended. Plans were being made, actions were being coordinated, and Sarah realized that staying silent was no longer an option. Not if she wanted to protect her daughters from being caught in the inevitable explosion. Meghan's calculated move. Understanding. Meghan Markle's motivation for entering into this secret agreement requires examining her position in late 2019 and early 2020. This was a woman who'd entered the royal family with enormous optimism and global support, only to find herself increasingly isolated and under attack. The British tabloid press had turned on her with a ferocity that shocked even seasoned royal watchers. Her relationship with senior royals, particularly William and Catherine, had deteriorated significantly, and her husband, while supportive, seemed unable to fully protect her from the institution's demands and expectations. Meghan has always been strategic. Her career in Hollywood required it. Her navigation of social circles required it. And her approach to royal life, despite what critics might say, demonstrated a clear understanding of power dynamics and media manipulation. The decision to reach out to Andrew wasn't impulsive, it was calculated. It was based on a clear-eyed assessment of what she needed and who could provide it. What Meghan needed most in late 2019 was leverage. She and Harry were already planning their exit from senior royal duties, but they needed insurance. They needed information that could protect them if the palace decided to retaliate. They needed allies, even unlikely ones, who understood how the institution operated from the inside. Andrew, for all his flaws and scandals, possessed exactly what Meghan required. The genius of Meghan's approach was its subtlety. She didn't make demands. She didn't threaten. She simply offered sympathy and understanding at a moment when Andrew was receiving neither from anyone else in his family. She positioned herself as someone who'd also been mistreated, who understood what it meant to be the family scapegoat, who knew the pain of public humiliation and institutional betrayal. But beneath the sympathy was calculation. Every conversation was an opportunity to gather information. Every expression of support was designed to deepen Andrew's trust and willingness to share. Meghan understood something crucial about human psychology. People who feel wronged are eager to talk, especially to someone who validates their grievances and shares their sense of victimhood. Sarah's revelation suggests that Meghan's information gathering was systematic and thorough. She asked questions about palace protocols, about decision-making processes, about which courtiers held real power and which were merely figureheads. She wanted to understand the institution's vulnerabilities, its pressure points, its secrets. And Andrew, feeling abandoned and angry, was willing to share far more than he should have. The information Meghan gathered served multiple purposes. Some of it was defensive, insurance against potential palace retaliation when she and Harry eventually stepped back from royal duties. Some of it was strategic, useful for managing media narratives and public perception. And some of it, according to Sarah, was held in reserve for future use. Ammunition that could be deployed if circumstances required it. The Vancouver meeting represented a shift in the relationship from information gathering to active coordination. By early 2020, Meghan and Harry were finalizing their plans to step back from royal duties. The announcement would come in January, shocking the world and infuriating the palace. But Meghan knew that the hardest part wouldn't be making the announcement. It would be managing the fallout and protecting their position in the months and years that followed. Andrew's role in this next phase was crucial. According to Sarah's account, he agreed to serve as a back-channel source for information about palace reactions and internal discussions. He would monitor family conversations, courtier gossip, and institutional responses, then relay relevant details to Meghan's team. In exchange, Meghan would use her media connections to occasionally seed positive stories about Andrew or push back against particularly damaging coverage. The arrangement was risky for both parties. If discovered, it would confirm every suspicion critics had about both of them. It would validate accusations of disloyalty and manipulation. It would give the palace legitimate grounds for severing ties completely. But both Andrew and Meghan calculated that the benefits outweighed the risks. Both believed they were clever enough to avoid detection. Both underestimated Sarah Ferguson's determination to protect her daughters and her willingness to expose the truth when pushed too far. What makes Meghan's involvement in this agreement particularly significant is how it contradicts her public narrative. She presented herself as someone who wanted nothing more than to serve the institution and the Commonwealth. Someone who was driven away by racism and institutional cruelty. Someone whose only goal was to live quietly with her family, free from the pressures and scrutiny of royal life. The existence of a secret agreement with Andrew, forged in calculation and maintained through deception, suggests a far more complex and strategic approach than her public statements would indicate. This doesn't necessarily mean Meghan didn't experience genuine difficulties within the royal family. The two things can coexist. She could have faced real challenges and real prejudice while simultaneously working to protect her position through strategic alliances and information gathering. But it does complicate the narrative. It suggests that her departure from royal life wasn't just about seeking peace and privacy. It was about securing leverage, maintaining influence, and ensuring she couldn't be marginalized or controlled by an institution she'd come to distrust. The palace's worst nightmare. For Buckingham Palace, Sarah Ferguson's revelation represents a crisis of unprecedented complexity. It's not just about two controversial figures making an alliance. It's about the implications of that alliance for the institution's credibility, security, and future. Palace officials are, at this very moment, conducting damage control exercises that would make military strategists proud. But the reality is that this situation may be beyond their capacity to manage. The first and most immediate concern is information security. If Andrew has indeed been sharing insider information with Meghan for years, what exactly has been compromised? Palace protocols exist for a reason. They protect the family's privacy, maintain institutional integrity, and preserve the carefully managed public image that keeps the monarchy relevant and supported. If those protocols have been breached, If sensitive information has been flowing to someone outside the institution's control, the implications are staggering. Consider what Andrew would have had access to, even after stepping back from public duties. He still attended family gatherings. He still had relationships with senior courtiers. He still received briefings on certain matters affecting the family. His position gave him insights into succession planning, financial arrangements, health issues, relationship dynamics, and strategic decisions. Any of that information, in the wrong hands or at the wrong time, could be weaponized. Meghan's potential use of such information is what keeps palace officials awake at night. She's demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of media management and public relations. She has access to influential journalists, powerful entertainment industry figures, and global platforms. If she possesses detailed insider knowledge about palace operations, family tensions, or institutional vulnerabilities, she could deploy that information strategically to shape narratives, pressure the family, or defend herself against criticism. The second major concern is precedent. If this agreement between Andrew and Meghan becomes public knowledge, confirmed and undeniable, it establishes a dangerous template. It demonstrates that even scandal-ridden royals can maintain influence through strategic alliances outside institutional control. It shows that the palace's traditional tools for managing wayward family members, isolation and public disapproval, may no longer be effective in an age of global media and celebrity culture. Future family members who find themselves at odds with the institution might look to this example. They might seek their own alliances, their own sources of leverage, their own insurance policies against palace pressure. The monarchy's ability to maintain discipline and unified messaging could be fundamentally compromised. And in an institution that depends on carefully managed public perception for its very survival, that's an existential threat. The third concern is public perception. The monarchy's approval ratings have fluctuated significantly in recent years, buffeted by scandal, controversy, and changing social attitudes. The revelation of a secret agreement between two of the family's most problematic members could trigger a new wave of criticism and skepticism. Questions would inevitably arise. What else is happening behind the scenes? Who else is making deals? Can this institution be trusted to operate transparently and ethically? Palace officials are already crafting their response strategy. The initial dismissal of Sarah's claims as false was predictable and probably necessary. But behind the scenes, more sophisticated approaches are being developed. Friendly journalists are being briefed. Legal options are being explored. Pressure is being applied to anyone who might have information about the alleged agreement. The goal is to contain the damage, discredit Sarah's claims, and move the narrative forward before it takes root in the public consciousness. But the palace faces a significant challenge. Sarah Ferguson is a formidable opponent. She's survived decades of scandal and public humiliation. She's learned how the media works. She's developed relationships with journalists who trust her. And most importantly, she appears to have evidence. The encrypted messages she mentioned, the phone records she referenced, the sources she's cultivated. If even a fraction of what she claims can be documented and verified, the palace's denial strategy collapses. There's also the Harry factor. Prince Harry's relationship with his father and brother has been strained for years, but the revelation of an agreement between his wife and his uncle adds new dimensions to that tension. Does Harry know about the agreement? Was he complicit? Or is he, like the rest of the family, learning about it only now through Sarah's revelation? The answers to these questions will significantly impact how the situation develops and how the family navigates its response. King Charles faces perhaps the most difficult position. Andrew is his brother. Harry is his son. The institution is his responsibility. He must balance family loyalty with institutional necessity. He must protect the monarchy's reputation while managing complex personal relationships. And he must do all of this under intense public scrutiny, at a time when his own reign is still being established and evaluated. The legal implications cannot be ignored either. If Andrew has indeed shared confidential information without authorization, Has he violated any laws or agreements? If Meghan has used such information to shape media coverage or influence public perception, are there grounds for legal action? Palace lawyers are undoubtedly exploring these questions, though any legal proceedings would bring their own risks and complications. What makes this situation particularly nightmarish for the palace is its unpredictability. Sarah's revelation was unexpected. Her evidence base is unknown. Her willingness to go public despite potential consequences suggests a level of determination that's difficult to counter. And the possibility that either Andrew or Meghan might respond publicly, either confirming or denying the allegations, adds further volatility to an already explosive situation. The unraveling. The fallout from Sarah Ferguson's revelation is still developing, but the immediate impact is already visible. Within hours of her statement, social media exploded with reactions ranging from shock to vindication to dismissal. Royal commentators scrambled to analyze the implications. News organizations launched investigations to verify or debunk Sarah's claims. And behind palace walls, emergency meetings were convened to assess the damage and chart a response. But perhaps the most significant development is happening away from cameras and microphones. Sources close to both Andrew and Meghan suggest that the alleged agreement has already begun to unravel. The exposure of their arrangement has created exactly the kind of pressure and scrutiny that neither party wanted. Trust, always fragile in relationships built on mutual self-interest, rather than genuine affection, is eroding rapidly. Andrew's immediate response was telling. Rather than issuing a public denial, he retreated into silence. His lawyers released a brief statement calling Sarah's allegations misleading and taken out of context, but stopped short of outright denial. That carefully worded response suggests an awareness that complete denial might be provably false. It suggests that some version of the relationship Sarah described did exist, even if the details or characterization might be disputed. Meghan's team has been more aggressive in their denials. Statements have been issued through various channels describing Sarah's claims as fantasy, desperate attention-seeking, and completely fabricated. But those familiar with Meghan's communication strategy note something interesting. The denials focus on specific characterizations rather than the fundamental existence of contact between her and Andrew. They deny a secret agreement without necessarily denying all communication or coordination. The careful wording on both sides suggests a recognition that some evidence of their relationship likely exists and could potentially surface. Both parties are leaving themselves room to acknowledge contact while characterizing it as innocent or misrepresented. But this defensive positioning also reveals vulnerability. If they were completely confident in their ability to disprove Sarah's claims, the denials would be more absolute and less nuanced. Sarah herself has remained visible since her initial revelation, a strategic choice that keeps the story alive and maintains pressure on both Andrew and Meghan. She's given carefully controlled follow-up interviews, each time revealing slightly more detail while holding back what she describes as the most damaging information for potential future disclosure. This drip-feed approach keeps the media engaged and makes it difficult for the palace to declare the matter resolved and move on. The evidence Sarah claims to possess remains the crucial unknown factor. She's referenced encrypted messages, phone records, and witness accounts, but hasn't yet made any of this material public. The strategic withholding suggests either that she's negotiating with palace officials behind the scenes or that she's building toward a more comprehensive revelation. Either way, the threat of documented proof keeps everyone involved on edge. Meanwhile, the royal family's internal dynamics have become even more strained. Reports suggest that King Charles summoned Andrew for a difficult conversation shortly after Sarah's revelation. The discussion, according to sources, was heated and unresolved. Charles demanded answers. Andrew deflected and minimized. Neither left satisfied, and the relationship between the brothers has suffered new damage. Harry's position is particularly complicated. If Meghan did indeed enter into an agreement with Andrew without Harry's knowledge, it represents a significant breach of trust within their marriage. If Harry knew about it, his own credibility and claims about wanting privacy and distance from royal drama are severely undermined. Either scenario creates problems for him personally and for the carefully constructed narrative around their departure from royal life. The impact on Beatrice and Eugenie, Andrew's daughters, has been significant. Both young women have worked hard to establish themselves as respected members of the royal family despite their father's scandals. Sarah's revelation threatens to drag them back into controversy and public scrutiny they've fought to avoid. Sources suggest both daughters are furious with their mother for going public without warning them, creating new family tensions that may take years to heal. Public opinion remains divided. Some see Sarah as a brave truth-teller, finally exposing the manipulation and deception that occurs behind palace walls. Others view her as a bitter ex-wife seeking revenge or attention. Still others are simply exhausted by royal drama and wish the entire family would sort out their problems privately. The lack of clear documentary evidence has allowed people to interpret the situation according to their existing biases and beliefs about the royals. What's becoming clear is that this situation represents a turning point. The old rules about royal discretion and family loyalty are breaking down. The assumption that scandals can be managed through silence and institutional authority no longer holds, and the realization that family members might actively work against the institution from within has created a new atmosphere of suspicion and vulnerability. The coming weeks will likely bring new revelations as various parties attempt to shape the narrative to their advantage. Andrew may decide that limited disclosure is preferable to complete denial if evidence emerges. Meghan may calculate that acknowledging some contact while minimizing its significance is the best damage control strategy. And Sarah may release more of her alleged evidence if she feels her credibility is being successfully undermined. But regardless of how the immediate crisis resolves, the damage to the royal family's cohesion and credibility may be lasting. The image of unity and shared purpose that the monarchy depends on has been shattered. The revelation that even disgraced and estranged family members might be working together against institutional interests creates a level of paranoia and distrust that will be difficult to overcome. Sarah Ferguson's explosive revelation has torn open wounds the royal family desperately wanted to keep hidden. The alleged secret agreement between Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew represents more than just a scandal. It represents a fundamental breakdown in the trust and loyalty that holds the monarchy together. As the fallout continues to unfold, one thing becomes increasingly clear: the House of Windsor will never be the same.